Dreamers, doers, and rule breakers. People who try new things, take risks, and break the mold. Wins or stumbles, that's how the world shifts. This is How It Shifts.
Welcome to another episode of How It Shifts. Today on the topic of the non-linear path to well-being, with my wonderful guest, Alessandra Gatti, who is the director of the Hearth, I said it right, Hearth Summit at the Wellbeing Project. Welcome, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Tina. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about this topic, which is so relevant for all of us.
It is 100%. And we will get into that in just a minute. Just tell our audience before we start a little bit about yourself, your story, your mission, and what you are up to these days.
So I'm Alessandra. Nice to meet you all. I'm a Swiss Italian based in Madrid. I've been living here for the last 17 years. And so I feel a bit like this European vibe, I would say. And in the last 6 years, I've been working for a very special NGO called the Wellbeing Project, in charge of the Hearth Summit that at the beginning was called the Wellbeing Summit for Social Change. But we recently, well, for the last edition, we changed our name to Hearth, and maybe I can tell you a bit more about that later. So my trajectory in reality comes from, I'm an experienced designer. I've been working for a long time in festivals. Then I've been working for 10 years in an agency, in an event agency. And then 5 years ago, I joined the project. And at the project, with an amazing team of producers and curators, we basically take care of organizing an event that takes place every 3 years, which gather 1,000 change makers from all over the world, reflecting and engaging and experiencing around the topic of well-being at different levels. So I'm really privileged, I think, to have this work. I'm very happy to be able to share a bit more about that with you.
Beautiful, beautiful, Alessandra. And yes, you're doing very, very important work. And we live in times of obviously rising burnout and depression rates. And I know so many people, also in my very close circle, that are impacted right now. And it feels like well-being is such a subjective thing to a certain extent, right? But tell us a little bit more, what is it? What is well-being?
So it's interesting that you asked this question, because at the Wellbeing Project, we don't have a definition of well-being. Mm-hmm. And it's very intentional, the fact of not having a definition of well-being, because there is really this will to listen to the community, which is a global community, and understand that well-being means different things in different places of the world, and also for different people in different moments of their lives. So in this case, I will talk, and many of the opinion probably that I will share are really a bit more my opinion as Alessandra, but obviously they are informed from the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years and the people that I've met in this very special community of the social change sector. Mm-hmm. So well-being, I was checking today because I was thinking that you might ask me this question. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, right, it's general health and happiness.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was thinking about that because I think it's a beautiful definition, I have to say. I found myself quite agreeing with that. And to me, it is it goes a step further, and it is also the fact of feeling present and feeling in harmony with oneself, with the people around us, with our community, and with the world. And so it's not as health, it's not only the lack of illness. I think that well-being has to do with flourishing as well, and not simply. And so, in that sense, I like the definition of the Oxford Dictionary, because it talks about happiness, it talks about, about health, but general health. And so, it's not only the lack of burnout, for example, or of mental health issues, but it's more. It's the bottom line. But then there is like this flourishing and this growing. So this is what well-being is for me.
Wow. It's why I'm saying this is it opens so many doors inside my inside my head and heart right now. Already just going into the topic of, okay, what is flourishing and how is that actually showing up in the world? Because what you're saying is, okay, not feeling burned out or not feeling, like the strong feelings of depression, for example, does not equal the state of well-being. But well-being is actually like more, right? It is being at, in essence, like you are at the fountain of yourself and you are like, you're flourishing into the world, which often is visible in creation or in impact or in some kind of connection to this world, right? So, and what I'm very much like, what I'm getting out of your definitions, I would almost say, is relationship, because nothing what you have described could exist without coexistence, right? So well-being is very much an interdependent or interconnected kind of, maybe practice, right? How does that work in today's, or how do you put that, or how do you bring that alive?
So you touch upon something very important, and it's something that has to do, in fact, with the fact that we are in constant relationship. So the individual well-being is foundational to develop a community that is based in well-being, a society that is based in well-being, and a planet that is based in well-being. So everything is absolutely interrelated. And I think that we can't develop that on an individual basis, but I also think that there is a deep inner work that needs to be done individually to accept this challenge in a way, to spend time with oneself. And I think that this is not, obviously, when there is all the inner work that you do, when you're suffering a burnout or a depression, I'm not qualified to talk about that, but I have lots of respect, obviously, for this. And I know, like at the Wellbeing Project, there are some people that are psychotherapists and psychologists, and so obviously there is all this dimension, this clinical dimension. But then I think that, generally speaking, when you talk about well-being, there is a work that needs to be done, and that it's really spending time with yourself, asking yourself, what does well-being means to you? What does this imply? What does this imply in your relationships? How does your well-being impact the well-being of others? And so there is there is a reflection that I feel it's important, an individual one, but the aim should always be collective. I was in one of the regional summits, the Wellbeing Summit for Social Change, but one of the regional one in Colombia. And there was a speaker that came on stage, and she's been practicing for a long time meditation and yoga. She's a meditation teacher. And so she said something that stayed with me, because she shared that, of course, meditation is like an individual practice. It's very important, and it helps in regulating your emotional system and getting to know yourself a bit better, and discovering your inner garden in a way. But that the real purpose of meditation comes alive when it becomes collective. So if it stays only in how better you feel, it defeats the purpose. The point is like that when meditation is something that is shared, it informs the way you relate to the others. And there is where you can produce change, because you're building a society and a community that is based on the values that go with, and the practices and the way of showing up that goes with meditation. And there it's when it's really powerful. Not when it's only about yourself and the fact that you feel better and more quiet or calm.
That's an interesting take, because we can take the meditation just as a metaphor for practically other behavior, or like being empathetic, or being authentic in how you are communicating, in how you are like interrelating with your neighbors, your colleagues, your family, and the people just you meet on the street practically, right? So it doesn't mean like everybody needs to go into meditation, but I find this very interesting, because I also feel like there are two parts to it. So I did like a little experiment also with myself, right? With like meditating, every day, once or twice, and it really did something with me. But at the same time, I felt sometimes like the place it was coming from, because it became such a habit that it also became almost forced, that it didn't have the same impact for my well-being as it could have. So it's like this kind of constant checking in with yourself again. What's my actual need right now? It might just be like going out and dancing, or go out and have a beer with your friends. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like finding this kind of balance, but it's like a dance, you're like dancing with your own needs and getting to know it better. And the same is obviously happening with the people you live with and you interrelate with. And I find that that's where the real challenge for a lot of people is. I mean, also, yes, spending time with yourself, I think, because you get easily distracted with other things and can fill certain gaps, so to say. But I feel like we're almost in this, it's like a trendy kind of wave, like well-being and mental health. And it's an entire industry, as we know, right? So to find like the truth in there for yourself and authenticity is not that easy anymore. So I see a lot of people struggling, and then this kind of, there's a certain idealism and radicality in it. Like, I need to completely disconnect, and I need to, if I haven't done ayahuasca now, if I haven't done, done the mushroom trip, I'm never going to get to the true essence of myself. And, so how can people kind of like find for themselves a way that really works? What would you say?
Wow, what a question. I don't know how to answer this, but I completely agree with you. And it's something that also at the Wellbeing Project we have been reflecting a lot, because it has become a bit of a trend. When the Wellbeing Project was funded like 15 years ago, we were not there. But now it has become a bit of a trend. There is a big industry. And there is also a bit this fallacy that like it's not that if you meditate everything will magically be
Yes.
good, because it doesn't work like that. The work is more deep and is more non-linear. So it's not enough to just like stay there 20 minutes meditation every day. I mean, the world was, if everyone that meditates would have like this impact for 20 minutes meditation per day, well, the world would be fantastic. But
Exactly.
not the case. So, it's not enough. Obviously, there is something much deeper, and there is also another reflection that someone that works and live in the space of like conscious communities, and she's a digital nomad, and so she's very in touch with this kind of alternative way of living, was sharing with me recently, and I really enjoyed this reflection. She told me, like in the space where I move, lots of people, the healing and the well-being becomes an identity. So you are never
Yes.
finished. It becomes something that you do, that define you. So you are constantly looking for the next
Yes.
well-being slash wellness experience, no? The ayahuasca, the mushroom,
Yes.
and it's very, very individual again. It's very, I
Yes.
mean, it's usually consumed and lived in community, and there is all this narrative as well. But in reality, it corresponds, there is a narcissistic element of
Yes.
very self-referential. So all this is true, and what is also very true is like that well-being is very different for each of us. So I think that, to me, the most important part is the fact of checking in with yourself, in fact, giving yourself the time, getting into the habit of asking yourself, how do you feel? How are you? Are you present to your life, basically? And because I don't think there is a recipe. On the contrary, I think that I think there are many different ways that you can cultivate your well-being, and also like the collective well-being. And I think it depends on very many different things. I think there is an aspect that is very cultural as well, because there is also like different practices in different parts of the world. But I think there always is an invitation to slow down and ask yourself the question. And I think this is the key aspect. And then from there, depending on what your answer or provisional answer is, I think there are many different ways, because as you were saying, there might be that you are in a serious deprivation of well-being, so you are in a moment of difficulty with your mental health, or with you are experiencing a burnout, or you're experiencing a depression, and then there is certain path that you can take. Or it's simply maybe need that you need to call your best friend and go for a glass of wine together and just like chat about life. And so, but I think that this is super important. And what I think it's important is like that while we ask about ourselves, we also ask this question about our community. And that is where it becomes collective, and from the community to the society, to the society to the planet, no? Because everything needs this well-being, everything needs this kind of harmony.
And you know what's interesting, because since it's such an individual thing, and I find it very brave also from the Wellbeing project to practically not define it, because obviously that's the only true way, since it's so subjective, right? But at the same time, it's like doesn't it make people naturally uncomfortable because the element of safety is missing, because you cannot define it and you actually have to make it an individual thing because it is individual. So you have to check in with yourself, right? And I can imagine that that's a very scary thing for the society we live in, where everything is actually, contradicting that, right? Like the entire system we live in, the way we are working, the way we are thinking, the way we grew up. So it's like, how do we integrate this practice into daily life?
I think it's very interesting because what you say, like when we create when we are designing the Heart Summit, for example, everything we do is an invitation, basically. It's an invitation to explore from an intellectual point of view, from an emotional point of view, from a relational point of view, what it could be a temporary word, so to say, bathed in well-being or funded based in well-being. And basically but without defining what well-being is. So like what we do really, like the principles of the design when we prepare the Heart Summit is intention and care. And of course you need to, I mean, anyone has to step into the invitation. We can't force someone into an invitation. No, this is a bit like in therapy. I mean, you need to be willing to go into this journey, because otherwise it's, again, even like a therapy, it's a dialogue, it's a relationship. It's not that the psychologist will arrive and give you a recipe to fix all your flows, so to say. No, it's like it's really like a journey that you have an active part. And so I think that one of the way that we cultivate is offer the possibility of slowing down and offer the possibility of paying attention. And I honestly don't, I think these are two ways, probably for sure there are others, but I think that there are two ways that you can start incorporating, you can start reflecting on well-being, and probably little by little discovering what you need to do to cultivate your well-being and the well-being of your community. It's more like through tools than through a specific recipe. And yeah, there is work to do. It's an active practice.
Exactly.
Which is a bit what you're saying. Like this is why, like the recipe that comes easy, like take the mushrooms and you will get into a super trip where you will find out things about yourself that you've never discovered, and everything will be solved. It's a shortcut that that responds to a very capitalistic logic that we are experienced everywhere, but it's unreal. It can't be. The human being is more complex than that and deserve another time and another calibration and exploration of it.
Yeah, because I mean, like also with these kind of experiences, you need to ground them and integrate them in your life and context you live in, right? And I think that's where, because it's very easy to like jump to conclusions. I had like this experience once, like when I was in Brazil and I came home and I really felt like universal love. It was a crazy experience, but then I was like, okay, what does that mean now? Do I need to open my relationship? Am I going to, like, it was like all these kind of discussions, and I was like completely overwhelmed then at some point. And my husband was just like, who are you? Like, he didn't go with me to Brazil. I was by myself, And so it was a whole process to reintegrate whatever I experienced into my current context and life, to ground it. And I had a wonderful coach, like, who helped me through that. But it's also in a way like underrated, right? Because there's no magic pill like setting you free, setting you, off to flourish in the world. That's not how it works, because it is interdependent to, like, in the system we live in. And I just want to go back for a second to the designing part, right? Because what you're doing is designing spaces practically to to host people to have certain experiences, right? And what's super interesting is because you're designing not for like a clear defined outcome, whatever. You're designing for a certain feeling, right? And a feeling that can be accessed by people, which is but never an end point, right? This is like the same what we have been like talking about or touching quickly, this kind of, okay, there's no one enlightenment, because it is not a linear path. It is a practice, and in different kind of situations, in our life, we have different kind of needs, and it goes like this, it's just like, it's an ongoing journey. So how well are we equipped with what tools that are working for ourselves? So I think, and that is oftentimes for people, obviously, where am I turning to? So could you just give us, to make it a little bit more tangible, like examples of tools that you work with or are familiar with, so to just, help us in our imagination?
Yeah. So one of the tools that we use, one of the principles, I would say, with which we design and we try also to, for example, at the Heart Summit, because I think it's important that at the Heart Summit, the people that come are change makers, are people that often are like in the front line of like the big challenges of that humanity faces today. So one of the principles that we have when designing, for example, the sessions with like the speakers, is from fear to hope. So it's to talk about the challenges, to name the challenges, but to adopt a hopeful vision, which is not a naive vision. And I think it's very important that it's not a naive vision. It's not like only like diminishing the importance of the challenge, but it's not a catastrophist vision neither. It's a vision that can bring people to have hope also in the humans, in the people that are working on these things, and also in there is something very important for us, which is like the fact of holding complexity and the fact of holding many different perspectives. As we are like a global community, is like bringing together different points of view, different wisdoms, different knowledge, and how they can inspire each other, how they can build and collaborate to create these more hopeful visions. So I would say like that, these grounding in hope, the fact of holding complexity, not trying to find a solution or easy solution or a linear solution, but like offering different perspective and inviting into the conversation, inviting in discovering, shifting a bit your way of thinking. And then there is another tool that, for example, at the Wellbeing Project is very important. And honestly, this also, like, to me personally, is very important, which is the language of the arts. We really believe that the arts can allow to reflect on some topics in a way that words not always can. They can, because you can relate like intellectually, but you can also relate very emotionally, very through the instinct, through the body even. And so it's another way of accessing and maybe like a different and sometimes a more immediate, a more impactful way of transforming. And I give you an example. Is last year when we celebrated the Heart Summit, the world was in a difficult position with like many wars, many changes, lots of instability, and that was present everywhere for everyone. But in the social change sector, there were some elements that felt so that this feeling was even more present. And we thought a lot on how to open like an event that brings together so many different people from so many different countries with so many different challenges, personal, professional. And finally, we decided to bring to stage all the artists that were present at the summit, that there were more than 100. And all together, they sang I will be a bridge over troubled water.
Oh my God.
And that there has been no need to say to say anything else. It just set the tone of the whole summit, of the fact of being together, of the fact of helping each other, of the fact of acknowledging the heaviness with which many of the attendees were coming, and hold it, but together. And no speech would have been as meaningful as deep as sharing this song together. You felt that, apart from the fact that it was super emotional, and honestly, it still is it when I think about it. But you really felt this energy, this togetherness in the room. So the arts have a very special power, I think.
Of course, right? And we know. And if we look back, and also tribes, and like if I looked at different kind of tribes in Brazil as well, they come together, they sing, and just like also listening to just the audio, like just the audio in Amsterdam. You're like sitting there and you're like, just like you start at some point, you're like, oh my gosh, you feel it everywhere. You feel it everywhere. And it's like, there's power in it, which you cannot put into words. And what I find so interesting in that, because I was, like if we talk about the organizational context, which is more where I'm coming from, right? And I look deeply into the topic of purpose and meaning. And with that, identity, belonging, all the like human needs, very basic and very important. Not basic, I mean, like they're basic human needs, but they are highly complex, obviously, right? And then the attempt to deal with these topics, and the result is the mechanization of them practically, we try to put them in what we know, in systems we know. We try to put logic on it and over again. So at the end of the day, the mechanization of it destroys it, right? Because it makes there's an attempt to make it linear, which is something that is not by root linear. It is by root unlinear. You cannot make it linear. So you take the human aspect out of it, which is a complete, like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it is purely human. So that's why I was like looking into and saying, like, artistry is so important in the organizational context, and it's a force we can all access. But how are we creating spaces for that? Because again, I think it needs a lot of braveness to do that. And if I look at the Hearth Summit context, it's so inspiring to me, and where it's also, it might be easy to look into the professional challenges first, for example, that are obviously impacted by the personal challenges and the other way around. But it makes it like there's logic to it. It's like, oh my gosh, you are in a disaster area in Brazil or wherever, the mudslides came down and you need to function. So what do you need for that, right? So you look at the most obvious things. But how do you access then this deeper, like force and power that is actually making the change? And this is true in every context. It doesn't have to be the extreme in like the disaster area or of like these change makers that are actually dedicating their life to that, which is highly ingrained in their identity. They feel belonging when they come together at like these kind of summits. But it's true in other contexts as well, for you and me, and in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and wherever we are like operating. How do you think we can make this, like, I don't want to say mainstream, because that would be like obviously also not what we want, but more like really, like integrating it into contexts where we know we are human beings. We just fail to create the environments for it, right?
Yeah, and I also think that the context where I work, it's a very specific context, and we also have the privilege of time to create. I mean, our mission is really to serve the community of change makers, and so we can dedicate all this care and this intention because this is our raison d'être, to really cultivate this cultural shift in the social change sector and in reality in society, hopefully, of putting like well-being at the center. And not because of anything, but because of the fact that it's the foundation to a sustainable life. In reality. With all the acception of sustainable. So I don't know how we can do that, but what I think is like that the changes need to come from the inside. So I think we can't like design from outside and say, okay, we will need to do things like that. I think it's all a matter of prototyping and of trial and error, and little by little trying to make things work in another way. And because of that, we need also like many different expertise. I mean, we need business men and women that are that have this more complex vision of the world and bring that into the corporate world. We need politicians that welcome this complexity and bring that to the politics world and the administrative world. We need that in every sector. So I think that it's I think that it's really like a movement that we need little by little to create, and that I think there are many, or maybe like I have an optimistic outlook on things, but I see many, like this podcast, a way of working on that, because you're bringing to the table these conversations. So I think it's through individual work, but that becomes collective and little by little, and communal, and little by little makes this change. I don't think that it can be top down. I think it's bottom up. I don't think it's linear. But I think that it's super important that, generally speaking, we don't forget to develop a critical thinking approach to things, which pass by the questioning, which pass by the stop and thinking, the pause and the paying attention. I think that the main enemy of all that is rush and speed.
I would have a couple of more enemies, I think, but no, because I've been in touch with many different initiatives as well, in different kind of contexts. And what I've seen is also a lot of idealism, which is creating a lot of exclusion, and which is then in the way of actually connecting initiatives as well. But I understand what you're saying, because you need to give it space and time to emerge, rather than trying to control the outcome and trying to put a time frame to it, right? Which is obviously very scary for a lot of business contexts and organizations, and in particular, I think corporates that are thriving on, control and an illusion of safety, let's put it in that way.
Exactly. Minimize risk, no? It's all about minimizing risk.
Exactly. But at the same time, I mean, these are all social systems consisting of human beings. So if you would talk to these people, and they would be open for it, to practice their own well-being in these kind of contexts, what would you tell them? How can they practice it?
My personal investigation, my personal exploration is still goes back to the fact of spending time with myself and asking myself what I need, and what I need to probably to be a better person, I would say. But to be a better person in so a better friend, a better daughter, a better wife, a better employee, a better boss, a better, I don't know, neighbor, and so there is this point of how can I flourish for myself and for the others? And I honestly think I honestly think that the question is about taking this risk, taking this journey, staying with the discomfort in reality of also not knowing, and of little by little trying to understand yourself a bit better. I would invite to not escape, I would say, and not allow for the words, so to say, to distract you. And to find a community where you feel to not stay alone, to find a community where you feel that what you said before, that I think it's super important, that you belong. I think this is the first edition of the Wellbeing Summit. We realized that this is what the people that were gathering together really needed. This feeling of belonging, uh, to a community, and feel that there were other people that were going through similar situation or had similar questions, and this has been essential. I mean, when we read, for example, like the comments of people, or like the conversation we had after the summit, were really like, I feel that, I feel the connection. I feel that we are into that together, and therefore it renovates your sense of hope, and like anything is possible. Then there is a fantastic activist that is now like in his late 80s, but that is called Satish Kumar. Is an ecologist as well, and he always says that to be an activist, you have to be optimistic.
Yes.
Otherwise you can't be an activist if you don't have the hope that the world change. But still there is like this thing of critical hope, no, and critical optimism. It doesn't mean what you're saying, without naivete and without ideology, because idealism sometimes can be a bit ideologist, and this is a bit scary. And we go back to the conversation of like, no, live this experience and your life will be transformed, and you will find the meaning of life and the purpose of life. I don't like that. I think it's the journey of life is to
100%.
try to figure out, no, what your purpose is and what the meaning of life is for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, as for me, I think it's just an ongoing journey, right? I was so like, okay, it's the one thing, and I was so deep in it. And our listeners by now, they also know my story. But no, but 100%, because that can also just like, create closeness and isolation and exclusion. So I think it's a lot about also staying open. It's important to find the people that you feel belonging to, but at the same time also staying open to a world beyond that, right?
100%.
It's nice to check in with each other. It's nice to feel this essence of hope or belonging or whatever you need in that moment, and then be out there in the world and carry it out there yourself. And I think one thing I would just like, because I also promised our listeners before, how did we meet? It's like, that is like an expression of openness and trust, right? And
100%.
we have this shared friend, Lais Glück, who was also on the podcast before, and she invited us to practically join this experience of coming together as strangers, without names, without a picture, just actually having a phone call practically, and talking to each other for 30 minutes without revealing our names and any, information that could identify ourselves. And we went from 0 to, I would say, 1,000 in terms of intimacy, right? It was like, oh, hey, soul sister, this kind of experience. And that day, I really didn't feel like leaving my comfort zone. I was like, oof, talking to a stranger now. And then I decided, no, I'm going to do it, because I feel like things are coming on my path because of a reason. And when Lais calls for an experience, I say yes, because there's deep trust. And it completely, like I told you that day, it completely, like, my mood, my feeling, like I completely entered the evening in a very different state, and I felt belonging. I felt heard and seen, and appreciated on a level where you would not think that is possible within like a 30-minute talk over the phone with a stranger, right? And I don't know how this experience was for you, but
No, but I completely agree, and look where we are, in fact.
yeah.
And for me, there was like a different aspect as well, that it was like, well, Lais and I, we are doing this course together of experience design. So it was it was an assignment, no? And so like, it was like, okay, you have to embrace what the other person, in this case, Lais for me, has designed for you. And, but I've met Lais like once for like 2 days, and we were many. We didn't even spend much time together. And it was so beautiful and so meaningful. And I think that there something that I really treasure, both from Lais and from you and us together. Lais and I had like a conversation before, like, and it was like a kind of a little interview. So I interviewed her, she interviewed me, and it was like in the context of the course to get to know a bit each other and design something that might create a nice experience for the other person. So like with the audience in mind, no? So in my case, she was the audience, and in her case, I was the audience. And so obviously, Lais listened very well. She asked the right questions, and she listened very well. And that's how she decided to create this experience. This is how she decided that among all the people that she knows, the stranger that I should meet was you. And again, when we met, the fact of not having any other distraction, not having any other information. So I didn't know if you were 80 or 20, if you were a man. Well, then when I heard you, yes, but if you were a woman, if you were European or South African or I don't know, Brazilian, as Lais is Brazilian. I didn't know what was your job. I had no idea, absolutely nothing. And this again made that these 30 minutes were all about listening, about sharing, but also about listening again. And so I think that there is an invitation there for me as well that is very related with what we are talking about, which is let's give the time and the space to listen and to see what emerge from this listening.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the most important ways to access something, accessing your well-being in a very authentic way, which is not a more commercial way of shortcuts and quick solutions, which in reality are just like covering up, and doesn't allow really a real flourishing, no? So, nor a real healing if we are in the healing space and instead of the flourishing space. So yeah, so I think that, I think listening is a practice that we should cultivate more, and start from me.
I completely agree. And I also, thinking back, it brought a lot of care, because we were both like sharing very intimate, like very, very personal, intimate information. But it did something, we connected on a very deep level, because we made, in a way, like, I think we experienced like similar feelings, but just with different, like things that, like held these feelings for us. But it just created such a beautiful container. And think about it, also only in 30 minutes. So the importance of design is like incredible if you put it in that way, right? So the question is, why are we not using these kind of tools more often to create real belonging, to make it possible to have real artistry in contexts where we believe it might not be possible? But hands down, it all consists of people. It all consists of human souls It's all social systems that are ready to be changed, and where really not just social change, but systematic change on different kind of levels can, happen.
Of course, everything is social change in reality.
Everything is social change. Yeah, you're
So
right.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very good question. I think more and more, I believe in an awakening, little by little, and people like each in its own way to bring this approach in a way, no, to how we stay in the world and how we show up in the world. We hope that this continues and more people like connect with this part, which at the end of the day, as you were saying from the beginning, is really connecting with our own humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very deep in reality, and very essential, and very simple, and very essential.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yes, amazing. It's an ongoing journey, and I know we can like go on because it is. I think it isn't. Bottom line, it is an exploration. It's an exploration of life. It is well-being is an exploration. As its purpose, freedom, and all the feelings that we're putting out there in the world, and how we're interrelating. Because tomorrow we are not the same than today, and that's why it keeps going. So I'm so grateful, Alessandra, that we had this conversation. You're such a genius and a wonderful soul, spreading so much light and love into the world. So very, very grateful. And how can our listeners reach you?
So, well, I'm on Instagram, for example, with like Lale Gatti, which is basically my name with an L in front of that. And then if someone is interested at the Wellbeing Project in general, we have a big website with like lots of information, also a lot about the Heart Summit, also about the regional Heart Summit that are everywhere in the world. So like, as I know that you have a very international audience. So it's literally, it is wellbeingproject.org. You can't get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And there as well, there are all the information, and there is my email, and there is everything that you might fancy to write. Thank you for having the opportunity to bring in this conversation as well in another context, and to make me reflect on that in another way, from a different angle, which contributed to this holding of complexity, which I found extremely nourishing and interesting. So thank you, Tine, and thank you for creating this beautiful podcast.
Thank you. So then I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and also thank you to our listeners.
Thank you to everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.